want you to picture this. You're driving down the highway. Maybe it's a Tuesday, just a standard commute. Or maybe you're finally on that road trip you planned for months. The playlist is perfect. Traffic is actually moving for once. You're in your own little bubble of calm.
And then it happens.
Yeah, it always starts with a smell.
Almost always.
Right, a weird, sharp tang in the air. You turn down the radio, thinking, maybe it's that truck up ahead. But then you see it. Just a tiny gray wisp of smoke curling up from the gap by your hood.
And your heart just drops.
It doubles. In about 3 seconds, your boring commute has turned into a life-or-death situation, and the only question in your brain is, what do I do right now?
It is a terrifying scenario. And the problem is, in that moment of panic, your brain often defaults to instincts that are, well, dead wrong.
Which is exactly why we're here today. We are doing a deep dive into fire hazards on the road. We've pulled together a comprehensive guide on this, and honestly, reading through it was a bit of a wake-up call. The goal isn't to make you terrified to get in your car, is to give you the tools to spot the invisible warning signs, the ones we all tend to ignore.
Exactly. And if we look at the big picture, the stakes couldn't be higher. The source material emphasizes that a car fire isn't just about the vehicle. It is about speed.
How so?
Modern cars are just full of plastics and synthetic materials. Once they ignite, they burn hot and incredibly fast, and that smoke becomes toxic almost immediately.
And we are going to bust some serious myths today, especially about what to do in those first critical seconds. I'll give you a spoiler alert.
Yeah.
One of the things I would have done is apparently the absolute worst thing you can do.
We'll definitely get to that. But for now, we're basically breaking this down into 3 pillars: prevention, detection, and reaction.
Okay, let's start with prevention. Let's look under the hood, so to speak. When I think of a car fire, my brain goes straight to the movies.
Oh, yeah. Mission Impossible.
Exactly. The car flips over, hits a wall, there's a huge fireball. I just assume that if I'm driving normally, I'm safe.
And that is the Hollywood effect. It's a huge misconception. While, yes, high-impact collisions do cause fires, the reality is much more mundane.
Which honestly makes it scarier.
It does. The majority of these fires are from mechanical or chemical failures that happen during completely normal, boring driving.
So if I haven't crashed, what is actually starting the fire?
It's often a cocktail of fluids and heat. Your car is essentially a machine that pumps various flammable liquids around a very, very hot block of iron.
I mean, I know gasoline is flammable. That's obvious. What else are we talking about?
Well, the big culprits are engine oil, brake fluid, transmission fluid, but the one that surprises most people, coolant.
Hang on, coolant. You're talking about the bright green or orange stuff. That feels like water.
It feels like it, yeah. Maybe spicy water, but water.
You're telling me the liquid designed to cool the engine can catch fire?
It's deceptive, isn't it? Because it is largely water, but the active ingredient is ethylene glycol. And while you can't just light a puddle of it with a match, it has this dangerous property called a high auto-ignition temperature.
Auto-ignition, so it doesn't even need a spark.
Precisely. If that glycol leaks and hits a surface that's hot enough, we're talking 600 or 700 degrees Fahrenheit, like your exhaust manifold, it just bursts into flame. No spark needed.
That is wild.
And here's the scary part. When glycol burns, the water boils off first, leaving this thick, sugary syrup that sticks to everything while it burns. It's like napalm.
Wow.
And it produces this invisible toxic gas before you even see any flames.
So a simple cracked hose spraying that safe green water onto a hot engine is basically a chemical flamethrower.
That's a horrifying but pretty accurate image.
Yeah.
It definitely puts a new importance on checking for leaks, but fluids are just the fuel. We also need to talk about the spark.
The electrical gremlins.
The electrical gremlins, yes.
I hate electrical issues.
Yeah.
But I usually just think of my Bluetooth not connecting. Not in an inferno.
Well, you have to remember that a car is a harsh environment. It's not like the wiring in your house that just sits still behind drywall.
Right.
Car wiring is subjected to vibration, extreme heat, freezing cold, moisture, every single day. Eventually, that insulation just wears down.
And when the insulation goes?
You get a short circuit. And a short circuit is basically electricity taking a shortcut where there is zero resistance.
Which creates heat.
An immense amount of heat in a split second. If that hot wire is touching carpet or some oily insulation or a plastic panel, you have ignition.
The guide also mentioned fuse maintenance. I feel like that's something people mess with. You
Yeah.
know, oh, this amp fuse keeps blowing. I'll just stick a 20 amp one in there.
That is a classic recipe for disaster. The fuse is designed to be the weak link in the chain. It blows to save the wire.
Huh? Okay.
If you put a bigger fuse in, you're telling the system, go ahead, let the wire get red hot instead.
Yeah.
You're almost guaranteeing a fire if there's a fault.
So we have leaking fluids, we have sparking wires, but the notes also mention these silent heat sources, things that aren't even broken, just getting way too hot.
Brakes are the prime example. Have you ever seen a race car at night? The brake rotors, they glow bright orange.
Sure, but I'm not driving Formula One on my way to Target.
You aren't, but the physics are the same. If a brake caliper sticks, which happens as cars age, that pad just drags against the rotor constantly.
You might not even feel it.
Exactly. But that friction generates massive heat. That heat radiates to the brake fluid, which we already said is flammable, and to the tires. Tires are oil and rubber. They get hot enough, they ignite.
That brings us to another heat source that I think is really relatable, especially for anyone who goes camping. The dry grass surprise.
This is one of the most overlooked hazards. Under your car, you have the exhaust system and the catalytic converter.
Right.
The converter's job is to scrub pollutants, and it does that with a chemical reaction that generates extreme heat. We are talking up to 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit on the outside.
1,200 degrees. That's hotter than my pizza oven.
Much hotter.
Yeah.
So imagine taking a 1,200-degree branding iron and pressing it into a pile of dry autumn leaves or tall grass.
It's instant.
It just lights up.
Right.
And the driver is probably sitting inside, checking a map, completely unaware that a fire is building right underneath their fuel tank.
So the takeaway is really that simple wear and tear leaks, worn wires, sticky brakes, the car basically becomes a tinderbox.
That's the reality. It's rarely bad luck. It's usually a maintenance issue that was ignored for too long.
Okay, so let's pivot. The car is a potential tinderbox.
Yeah.
But I assume it doesn't just go from fine to inferno in a millisecond. There must be signs.
There are. And detection is all about your senses. The most important tool you have is your nose. The source material is very clear. Unusual odors are almost always the first clue.
But cars smell weird sometimes. What am I specifically sniffing for?
You have to know the smells. Burning rubber is really distinct. It's thick and heavy. That's probably a belt slipping or a hose melting on the engine. Then there's the smell of burning plastic. That acrid chemical smell. That's electrical insulation melting somewhere.
And I'm guessing if I smell something sweet, like pancakes.
That's the coolant. That's the glycol we talked about. Vaporized glycol smells like maple syrup. If you smell that while you're driving, you have a coolant leak, and you need to pull over before it finds something hot.
The nose knows. What about my eyes, besides just smoke?
Your dashboard. We treat those lights like annoying suggestions, but they are sensors. The oil pressure light isn't just saying add oil.
It could be saying you are leaking oil onto your hot exhaust.
Exactly. Or the battery light. If that flickers or your headlights dim at a red light, your electrical system is struggling. It's working too hard, creating resistance and generating heat. That's a pre-fire warning sign.
So if the car's acting possessed, don't just turn the radio up.
Never ignore the glitches. They are symptoms of a fever in the system.
Okay, let's move to the high-stakes part of this. The reaction. Let's say I miss the smell. I'm driving and suddenly, boom, smoke is billowing out from under the hood. What is step one?
Step one is immediate. Stop and shut down. Pull over to the safest spot possible, paved if you can, and kill the ignition.
Why is turning the key so urgent?
You have to kill the engine. When the engine is running, the fuel pump is actively pushing gasoline at high pressure. If a fuel line is compromised, you're just spraying gas into the fire.
Got it.
The moment you turn off the ignition, that pump stops. You also cut the current to the electrical system. You're severing the lifelines feeding the fire.
Okay, fuel off, electricity off. Now, here's where we get to the part that blew my mind. My instinct, if I see smoke, is to pop the hood. I want to see what's wrong.
And that instinct is incredibly dangerous. Do not, under any circumstances, pop the hood.
So walk me through the science. Why is looking at the fire bad?
It's the chimney effect. Think about a wood stove. When you open the damper, what happens?
Air rushes in, the fire just roars up.
Right. Your engine bay is a confined space. If a fire is starting in there, it's likely oxygen-starved. It's just smoldering. The hood is acting like a lid.
So the moment I pop that latch,
You introduce a massive, sudden rush of oxygen. You aren't just feeding the beast, you are inviting it out. The flames will rush upward to meet that new oxygen. If you're standing there, you're in the path of a fireball.
that's a terrifying thought. Okay, hood stays closed, no matter what. What's next?
Evacuation. And be fast. Get everyone out. The guide says use doors, not windows. It's faster.
And once we're out, distance? The guide says 100 feet. That feels really far. Is that overkill?
It is not overkill. It's a calculated safety margin. You have to understand a car fire isn't a campfire. It's a pressurized vessel.
What's going to explode?
Well, the fuel tank is the obvious one, but there are others. The gas struts that hold up your hood or trunk, those are pressurized cylinders. When they overheat, they can shoot out like missiles.
Wow.
The tires can explode, sending rubber shrapnel flying.
I hadn't thought about shrapnel. I was just thinking about the heat. And then there's the smoke. Burning plastic, foam, upholstery, it all releases hydrogen cyanide and carbon monoxide.
Nasty stuff.
Standing 20 feet away, you're inhaling poison. 100 feet gets you away from the shrapnel and dilutes those toxins.
100 feet. Got it. And warn others.
Yes. Wave them back. Call 911 immediately.
So this brings us to the action hero moment. I have a fire extinguisher in my trunk. We see smoke. Do I try to be the hero? Do I try to save my car?
This is a huge fight or flight decision.
Yeah.
And the expert advice is very strict. Only attempt this if the fire is small. You have a clear escape route and you know exactly what you're doing.
And if you have the right equipment, I can't just use a water bottle, right?
Absolutely not. Water on a gasoline fire will just spread the burning liquid. You need a rated fire extinguisher, specifically Class B and Class C.
Break that down.
Class B is for flammable liquids gas, oil. Class C is for electrical fires. You'll usually see ABC or BC extinguishers for cars. If you don't have one, do not engage. Okay, so I have my ABC extinguisher. The fire looks small, maybe just a flicker near the battery. How do I use it? The source mentions the PASS method.
PASS. It's the universal acronym. It stands for pull, aim, squeeze, and sweep.
Okay. P is for pull.
Pull the pin at the top. That breaks the seal and lets you use the handle.
A is for aim. This seems simple, but I bet people mess it up.
They do. They panic and aim at the top of the flames. But you have to aim at the base of the fire, where the fuel is.
Kill the source. Okay. Then S, squeeze.
Squeeze a handle to release the chemical agent.
And the final S, sweep.
Sweep the nozzle side to side, coating the fuel source, trying to suffocate it.
And how far away am I for all this?
Start about 6 to 8 feet back. Don't get too close. And here's the hard limit. If you empty that extinguisher and the fire is still going, you are done. Drop it and get away.
Right. Don't go down with the ship. The par is insured. You are not.
A car is just metal and plastic. It's replaceable. You are not.
Okay, let's make sure we never have to use the PASS method. I want to circle back to prevention. It feels like an ounce of prevention is worth, what, 4,000 pounds of cure here?
It really is. It just comes down to a maintenance mindset. Pop the hood once a month. Look for wet spots. Look for frayed wires.
There was one specific prevention tip in the source that I hadn't really considered. It was about weight.
Yes, the overload factor. This is crucial for road trips. Every vehicle has a gross vehicle weight rating. If you pack a car with 5 adults and a trunk full of luggage, you might be exceeding that.
And how does a heavy car lead to fire?
The engine works harder, so it runs hotter. But mostly, it's the brakes. Stopping a heavy car creates way more friction heat. If you're going downhill in an overloaded car, your brakes can literally catch fire just from trying to slow you down.
That is really good to know. So pack a little lighter, and then there's refueling hygiene.
Simple stuff, but critical. Don't top off the tank. You know how people click the handle 3 more times to get to a round number?
Guilty.
Don't do it. You need expansion room. And make sure that cap clicks. A loose cap lets gasoline vapors escape. And those vapors can be ignited by something as simple as static electricity.
And finally, circling back to where we started with the dry grass situational awareness when you park.
Always look at the ground. If there's debris, tall grass, a pile of leaves, don't park over it. The underside of your car is a furnace. Just treat it like one.
So let's try to wrap all this up. We've covered the chemistry of coolant, the danger of popping the hood, and the 100-foot rule.
If I had to boil it down to the absolute essentials, 1, trust your nose. If you smell something burning, investigate it. 2, never open the hood of a smoking car. And 3, distance is your friend. Get away from the toxic smoke.
And looking at the bigger picture, why does this all matter, besides the obvious?
Because we share the road. A car fire on a highway shuts down traffic, it blocks emergency vehicles. The runoff from the firefighting melted plastic, oil, foam is terrible for the environment. Maintaining your vehicle is a civic responsibility. It protects you, but it protects the community too.
That's a powerful way to look at it. It's not just about avoiding a repair bill.
Not at all.
I want to leave you with this final thought.
Yeah.
We all live in a world of dashboard lights and weird noises. We often ignore a check engine light or a faint smell because, let's be honest, we don't want the hassle. We don't want to pay the mechanic. But when it comes to fire, that small hassle is actually a countdown clock. The next time you smell something burning, will you just turn up the music and hope for the best? Or will you pull over before that countdown hits 0?
It's a question that could save your life.
Thanks for deep diving with us today. Stay safe and keep your eyes and noses open.
Safe travels, everyone.
Please like, subscribe, and get notified.